You're listening to a CNA podcast. It's the second largest city in South Korea, renowned for its beachy vibes, its historic sites, and lively markets. It's the country's busiest port as well. But it's also facing extinction. I'm talking about Busan, the existential crisis brought on by low birth rates, an exodus of youth, and industrial decline. I'm Teresa Tang. This week, Senior Korea Correspondent Lim Yun-suk returns to the podcast, and we're going to discuss just how close the city is to disappearing and what is being done to save it. Hi, Yun-suk.
Hello, good morning.
Busan is on my list. It's on the list of cities I really want to visit, but I haven't been to yet. It sounds like such an energetic and vibrant place. You've been there, so how would you describe it to someone who has never been?
Well, yes, I hope you do, Teresa, because yes, I have been there many, many times, and I love Busan. I mean, it is vibrant, and in a way it is hectic too, because there's just a lot of tourists there these days, but it's not like overwhelming like here in central Seoul. And also it's a place where you see high-rise buildings and you see the city life of Busan, but also just not too far away, it's known for its beaches. The Haeundae Beach in Busan is really the place to be during the summer, and many South Koreans see it as, if you want a summer getaway spot, then Busan is the place to go. But also, Busan has one of the biggest seafood markets, if not the biggest, here in South Korea. And so if you love seafood, then, you must visit Busan. And then, of course, every year you have the Busan Film Festival, the International Film Festival, and that attracts tourists from all over the world and all the movie lovers. And so, Busan is a place where you can get the city life, the high-rise buildings and all, but they can always feel as if you're relaxed, and it's more calm than here in central Seoul.
We often think about endangered species, less so endangered cities, I think. But Busan is exactly that. Studies have shown that it has already entered a phase of extinction, and it's the first city in South Korea to be described as such. Can you tell us, why does it find itself in this situation?
Well, when you said that, I really feel sad hearing it, because it really is a place where many South Koreans say, it's the second largest city in South Korea. And so when you think of Busan, you think of a lot of people walking around, a lot of people living there, and a place where, most South Koreans would say that, hey, maybe I will go to Busan to live. But yes, in recent years and even in recent decades, I think they have been losing a lot of their population. And in fact, in 2023, there were about 3.29 million people, but that number dropped to about 3.27 million last year. And experts here are saying that it can continue to drop unless there are drastic measures being taken, because many see it as a great place to visit, go have fun. But for people living there, especially the young South Koreans who were born and raised in Busan, they're just leaving because they cannot find jobs. Most of them, they will live in Busan until, say, high school, and then after that, they will move to Seoul to come and attend one of the universities here, because they think there are more opportunities, and then they would stay on. But many Busan residents, young people too, if perhaps they went to a university in Busan, then after that, most of them will want to come here to central Seoul because they think that there are more job opportunities and there are just more things to do here in Seoul than there is in Busan. Now, yes, the market here in Seoul is better than Busan, but many people that I meet and met in Busan say that just not enough job opportunities, especially the kind of jobs that many of the young South Koreans want. They want to go to the big conglomerates, major IT firms, the well-known companies, and they're just simply not any of them in Busan right now, and so they're leaving. And in fact, over the past 30 years, around 600,000 people have left Busan, and many of them, headed towards Seoul or the surrounding areas around here. And when you ask the young people still in Busan, many of them will just say that they don't have a choice. And, when I was in Busan doing this story, I visited Dongso University in Busan, and many of the students there, including Lee Jong-bin, said that they wish there were more jobs because they just don't want to leave, but they have no choice.
It's a bit disappointing. If there were more job opportunities and chances in Busan or other regions, they could have grown and developed with the unique advantages of their own region. But right now, everything is centered on the capital region, and that feels somewhat discouraging.
It really was bad, and so it feels like when I talk to the young people there, it feels like if they could, they would want to stay, but they just feel like they have no choice, and so they will have to leave their hometowns. And they say that's sad, and they're just hoping that there'll be more measures taken so that they can come back home.
It really is so sad because these reports paint such a dire picture of what's happening. And they say that the imbalance between the non-working and working population in the city is just so bad that it's economically unsustainable. I have to ask, is there a rough timeline for this extinction? How soon are we talking?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, Busan officials say that that will never happen because they are taking the measures. But, it really does feel empty because when I was there were some streets that was, really completely empty. And I remember like walking through some of the neighborhoods and not seeing a single person on the street.
Wow.
And at one street, there were these two grandmothers who were sitting out there chatting, and they were saying that people have just left, and they were just showing me the houses. And you can clearly see that there were empty houses. There were mails that were piled up, untouched. And so you could feel the emptiness in that neighborhood. And, South Korea already has one of the world's lowest, if not the lowest birth rates. And you sort of like feel that in Busan. I mean, here in Seoul, yes, there are no children and kids playing outside, but I got this feeling that it's worse in Busan. And so, it really feels like people are leaving. And, Busan, the cost of living in Busan is cheaper than here in Seoul. And housing prices, though a few years ago was really high as many people were moving to Busan, they have now dropped and people simply aren't buying or renting houses even in Busan. And so many of those who live there now are saying that they're choosing to leave Busan.
Not all is lost, though. Officials are trying to be optimistic about all this. They think that they can change the tide. And we know tourism is a significant part of the economy, and authorities are hoping to really rev it up by building a new airport, among other measures. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, they are. And yes, if you go there and visit Busan, you do see a lot of tourists, and you wonder, why is this place losing its population? But this is an issue that has been around for years in Korea. I mean, if not decades, and it's something that I think we have seen in the news reports, but I don't think a lot of Koreans, including myself, took it very seriously. And, they're saying that the government officials need to find ways to make the people want to stay. And when I was talking to the government officials, they were saying that the real solution they think and they know is jobs. I mean, they need to find ways to attract the big companies to set up offices in Busan so that the young people have a reason to live and stay in their hometowns in Busan. Now, under the previous Yoon Suk-yeol administration, there were plans to relocate, say, for example, the Korea Development Bank from here, Seoul, to Busan. And there were some concerns that those plans will not go ahead under the new president. But South Korea's newly elected president, Lee Jae-myung, has said that he supports that relocation and he wants to drive this regional growth. And in fact, one of the first moves that he took when he held that cabinet meeting, his first cabinet meeting on June 4th, was to order the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, which is right now located in Sejong City, to be relocated to Busan as well. So he has emphasized several times that he wants to decentralize the Seoul capital, give more support and to regional cities like Busan. And so there is hope. And also another major project that's underway is the international airport, as you just said. Now, the plan is to build this Gadokdo airport and have it running by 2029. And so, yes, Busan officials, including people like Lee Kyung-duk from the city government, are still optimistic. And they say that, these kind of moves, they are hoping can turn around and bring people back and this energy back to the city.
굉장히 한정적입니다.
Currently, there are only a few entry points for international travelers, so even those heading to Busan often have to pass through Incheon, the international airport. But once the new airport opens, there will be more flight routes and countries connected, strengthening Busan's position as a tourist city.
Now he says, he didn't give a timeline, but he says give Busan a few more years, and he believes that if Busan can attract those big companies, big banks, and have the oceans ministry and some of the major political government offices in Busan, then it's very possible that there will be more jobs created and more people will want to stay there.
I really liked your report because you gave us a sense of what people on the ground think. You managed to get a lot of young people to talk to you, people with young families. And there was one man that you spoke to that struck me because he actually decided to move back to Busan after living in Seoul. So it seems like there's this kind of slow reversal happening. What's that saying, Suk? A man travels the world over in search of what he needs and then returns home to find it?
Well, yes, I think so. And in fact, I didn't think that that was going to be part of the story because I didn't realize that there were people moving back until I was in Busan and I was talking to the people there. And, I visited this Tongsong University in Busan to hear what the young students had to say about this issue. But when I was there, I did meet this young university staff that you're talking about who really stood out to me too because he graduated from a university in Busan. He moved to Seoul to work and he found a job at a video production company. He said he loved what he was doing. He spent about 10 years here in Seoul, but over time, he felt the pressure, the fatigue was starting to build, and he just wanted something more and not just a job, but he wanted a life. He wanted to settle down, get married, start a family, and that's when he started to realize that he was missing his home, and that's Busan. And he felt like if I don't move back to Busan now, he didn't think that he would be able to in the future. And so he moved back to Busan. He's now working at the university, is married, and has a family. And so he was telling me, yes, it's true, Busan is smaller, the salaries are much lower, the cost of living is also lower. But he's saying that, even though he earns less in Busan, but, if you just spend less, then he's much happier than he was in Busan than he is here in Seoul. And he says, his life here in Seoul was just too hectic. Everything was like 빨리, is a Korean word for quick. And everyone's competing against each other here in Korea, especially here in Seoul. And he just felt that there was no space to breathe. But back in Busan, he's now living, a slower pace of life. Yes, the wage that he earns now is much lower, but he says he's still enjoying it and is much happier. And in fact, apparently many of his friends are asking him for advice. And he says, if you are at that stage where you're wondering whether you should come back or you should stay, he recommends that they do come back because there is hope. And government officials and people I speak to say, if there are more people like him returning, and if they feel that this pull towards coming back to their hometown, their home, then maybe the trend that you just mentioned could start to reverse. And Busan officials say that they are seeing some signs of this working out, that the rate of people leaving the city has slowed compared to the past decade.
Yeah, that is the hope that more people will return to Busan. But if this march towards extinction continues, what's the bigger picture here, Suk? I mean, what if there's someone listening to this saying, who cares? It's just one city. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it goes extinct. What would you say to that? What impact would its disappearance have on wider Korea?
Well, that's a fair question, but, who cares? It's just one city. But Busan is not just any city. It is South Korea's second largest city. So if a city like Busan cannot survive here, then, what hope is there for other cities here in South Korea, the smaller ones? And it's not just about one city disappearing because it's a huge imbalance here in Korea. I mean, everything right now is really centered here in the capital, Seoul. And that, area here in Seoul is overcrowded. Meanwhile, you see other regions, the second largest city in Seoul, are emptying out. I mean, that doesn't sort of like make sense in a way.
Yeah.
And many experts here are saying that if this continues, then South Korea will become unbalanced economically, socially, and also even politically. And also, if you look at the cultural side of it, losing Busan isn't just about, losing the big buildings and the infrastructure. It's also about losing the Busan identity. And if you go to Busan, Busan has a very strong identity. I mean, it has its own dialect. It has its own food. It really has its own vibe. I think among all the other capitals here in South Korea, I think it has one of its most biggest sort of like this vibe that you can only see and feel in Busan. And all of that will be disappearing. And that means, in a way, a part of South Korea's personality is also disappearing. Now, we've seen, for decades, I mean, if you go out to the rural areas here in Korea, you see a lot of the schools shutting because there are no children there. And that is something that a lot of Koreans expect and know is happening. But now if we're seeing that kind of pattern happening in major cities like the second largest city, Busan, then, it really gets people thinking. And we see in the past, I mean, even for me, I used to think of Busan as this economic hub because it used to be the home to the shipbuilders, the shipping companies, and trade here in Korea. But for it to disappear, I think it really is a warning sign that if we cannot fix Busan, a major city, then, what are we going to do about the smaller places? And so hopefully the Busan officials will be able to do something about it. And Teresa, I hope that you get a chance to visit Busan because it really is a fun, energetic, vibrant place. I'm sure that you would love it.
Yeah, it sounds like I would too. Just a fascinating story, Yoon-suk. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. And yes, next time, please go to Busan.
You heard Yoon-suk. And if you want to see what it's like if you haven't been there, you have to check out Yoon-suk's TV reports. They're online. They're doing really well. You can see her stories on YouTube and also at CNA.Asia. Watch them for yourself. And a reminder, there are also TV episodes of CNA Correspondent every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. As always, thanks very much for your company this week. I'm Teresa Tang. The team behind this episode is Saya Win, Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Junani Johari, Pei Ning Ho, and Craig Dale. Bye for now.